Hey, Seth here with the TBGPodcast. What you're about to listen to is our second episode. At the time of its recording, we didn't have our website live and we didn't have any shirts available. However, we do now. And so I'm here to tell you to go over to tbegotten.com and take a look. We've got a number of shirts there. One of them is what I'm wearing now. You can see the logo on the chest here with TBG. On the other side is the QR code. And again, the QR code, if you've listened to the last episode, the QR code, the intention there is to easily be able to share the concepts behind the shirts. So, say, for example, you have a shirt that depicts a concept of faith. You can share that QR code. That'll take you to a page on our website with all of the podcasts that talk about faith and other shirts that have faith designs as well. Anyways, I hope you enjoy this podcast. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to the TBG Podcast, where we talk about identity, who we are, and who we're meant to be. Today's topic is creeds and why we get our creed from the Bible. My name is Seth. I am a husband, a father, and an entrepreneur, and with me is my wife.
Hi, I'm Katie, and I'm a wife and a mother and a student in a master's program for either marriage and family therapy or psychology. It's in the works. And with me is
Just Kai.
Okay. So, creeds. We wanted to talk about it because I think creeds is something that's largely either misunderstood or not taken very seriously by a lot of people. So we wanted to kind of go through and for our second podcast kind of lay the groundwork for why we think creeds are important and why we get our creed from the Bible. Because basically everything in this podcast is going to have to do with the Bible. So
you should define what even is a creed.
What even is a creed? So creed comes from the Latin word credo, which simply means I believe. So it's just a statement of belief. So if you say, I believe the sky is blue, that is a creed relating to the sky. So because of that, it's kind of impossible not to have a creed. So if you're sitting there thinking like, oh, I don't know what a creed is, I've never thought about it, I don't have one. Well, you have a creed, just you may not have thought about it. And that's something that we'll talk about too, why we think that you should be intentional about your creed. But yeah, everyone has a creed because you hold beliefs about the way life is and just the way things work. And even if you haven't really thought about it, you still have beliefs about stuff.
Like the chair is going to hold me.
Like the chair is going to hold me. Or life will be good enough if I'm just a good person. Or whatever. Or Buddha will save me. All of those are creeds. So because everyone has a creed, we believe that it's important to be intentional about your creed. But why do we believe that? Why do you believe that?
Well, I mean, kind of how you mentioned that you're going to have a creed whether you're intentional or not. And I actually, funny enough, heard a little clip on the radio today as I was going around about. And I don't remember who it was, but they were talking about how if you're not really intentional about the direction you're going, the world is really going to pull you. And how we need to be intentional with our decisions and our actions because the path of least resistance is not really the best path to go down. And so I thought it was kind of funny because I knew we were going to do the podcast tonight, and here I was listening to this lady who sounded really wise on the radio talking about it. And I mean, we also know that everyone has a framework that they go through life on. And so, in psychology, you learn a lot about how depending on your narrative, on the way that you see things, is going to color, if you will, your reality. And so, if you're working with someone who's experienced a lot of trauma or something, and they come from a place of hurt, then when they enter into new relationships, even if they're not relationships that cause hurt, they will be colored. So it kind of just shows that even if you're not it would be, you're not thinking of, oh, well, my past experiences are my creed, right? But they have, in a way, shaped your belief system and how you interact with the world. And so if you don't take a moment and say, why do I think that, I don't know, crossing a bear would be better than crossing a man on a
Ooh.
trail? Why do I think that? If you don't take a moment to stop and really unpack it, at the end of the day, you're living with tons of biases. And, in therapy training, that's something that comes up a lot is in cultural sensitivity is understanding your biases, because we all have biases. And so again, that's why we need to be intentional, because you're going to have biases, and those aren't necessarily bad things. I mean, they're not something to be ashamed of. They're
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
you need to be aware of. Um, and so that's why I think that it's really important that people be intentional in deciding what they're going to believe is true.
Yeah, it's like if someone in your past, say a male authority figure or something like that has hurt you, and you're not intentional about digesting that, you can be very averse to all males in general
Mm-hmm.
when it's not necessary.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's one good analogy that I was just thinking about just a moment ago. I think that fits is if you're on a sailboat in the middle of the ocean, if you're not intentionally taking the rudder and the sail and setting it and going in a direction, then you're just going to be blown around by the wind or the currents to wherever they happen to go.
Yep.
Another analogy that you and I were talking about yesterday, if you have this idea of everyone is on kind of a personal train ride, and as you go along, you come to forks in the rail, and you get to choose which fork you go down, and that's basically just anytime you come to a decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the decisions you make as to which fork you go will be informed by what you believe about those paths and what is the best route. And so if you're just going through life without intentional thought or anything, then you might go down this one and then that one and then this one and that one, and then it might lead somewhere really bad. Because I think in this analogy, there's a few places that lead to good places, and then most of them are bad.
And this is kind of a weird example too, and I don't know if we need so many analogies, but it just popped into my head. Very recently, it's become pretty popular to, the study that they did with putting pants on dogs.
I have not heard of this study.
Yes, you have. The synthetic
Oh,
pants.
yeah.
And
I've heard of it.
they put different pants. If you haven't heard of it, it's a very interesting study. They put some different pants on different dogs. Some were polyester, some were wool, and the other I think were cotton. And what they found is that the dogs that were wearing polyester pants were infertile, essentially. So this has sparked, a lot of discussion in regards to clothing in which we buy. And how does this fit in? Well, here's the point that I'm going to make. Before reading this study, when you were unaware, right, you may have picked your clothes based off of a brand or the price tag or whatever, so many different things. But
the style, the comfort,
right. But since I've learned of this study, now it doesn't matter if I walk into the bougiest store and it's the prettiest dress. If I look at the tag and it's 100% polyester, to me it has no worth, because I don't want to put polyester on my body.
Or at the very least, reduced worth, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so again, that's where if you're in this way of life where you need to put clothes on your body.
Yeah.
You're gonna buy clothes.
Every morning you go and you put clothes on.
Yes. But
unless you're some children. No.
Right. Then you're chased down by your parents and
Yeah.
goes put on. But anyways, you're gonna put clothes on. So if you're not informing yourself on what's good for your body and intentional, you might be putting on those polyester pants, and maybe that's not important to you.
And then you won't have kids.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's quite the study, but if you don't stop and you're not intentional, you're gonna still be making decisions. And so if you have something that informs those decision-making skills, then you're gonna make different decisions, because now you're informed. You're an informed consumer. It's like reading the labels on your food packages.
Yeah, and this is not something that you can just stop and be like, I don't believe any of that. I'm not going to choose a creed.
Yeah.
Because life goes on.
You still have to eat. You still have to put
eat. You
clothes
still have to put
on.
clothes on.
Yeah.
Right.
You still have to
And
sit
so
in
the
chairs.
reasons why you make the decisions you do are based in what you believe about that choice and what's the best choice.
Yep.
And that's a creed.
Right. So they're all
Bam.
over the place.
They're all over the place.
That's the point.
Yes. So if you're going to be intentional about your creed, then the next logical question is, where do you pull your creed from? Where do you get your beliefs from? I think some people, especially maybe in modern days, just kind of come up with a philosophy of life in their mind. But in reality, it is actually informed a lot of the time by religions and different religious texts. So we are Christian, obviously, and we have chosen to pull our creed from the Bible. There's many reasons why, at least for myself, that I have chosen to pull my creed from the Bible, but some of them have to do with kind of science and history and even my own personal experience.
Right.
Yeah. So if we're to try to break this down a little bit, if we're to choose a religious text to pull our creed from, or any sort of text or any sort of source to pull our creed from, it logically makes sense, at least in my mind, to pull that creed from a source which is as close to reality as possible. Because if you're pulling a creed from, I don't know, a children's book, like it's not very close to reality. Alice in Wonderland, like, yeah. So it seems like it might be a fairly minute, obvious point, but I think it's worth stating that you want something that is as close to reality as possible, because, like in that train ride analogy, if you are you're at the start of your train ride or any point along it, you have the choice of choosing manuals or maps to make your decisions based off of those maps. And if you get to a junction and there's 3 paths you can take, but this manual says there's 4, well, that's not very accurate to reality. So you want something that is accurate to what's actually in front of you.
Yeah, and I think to build off of that analogy, like, it's important that your manual is accurate, because what if 2 of the 3, in reality, right, the 3 options, how about one goes off a cliff and the other one goes into a body of water? Like, you want to be able to make informed choices that are based in reality, and so that's why it's important to choose something that reflects reality.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know exactly if the Bible reflects reality. I think the Bible defines reality.
And that has to do with faith. That's going to be a really, really cool podcast.
Yeah.
Not necessarily our faith, but actually God's faith.
Yeah.
As creator. Anyways, that's going to be a faith of Jesus. That's going to be a really cool podcast once we get there. Yeah. Okay, but for now, because this whole thing of we think it should be close to reality, I wanted to share a little bit of some of the reasons why, at least I personally think the Bible is the closest to reality out of religious texts. One of those is with the creation story. The creation story in the Bible basically lays out, okay, this is how the world began. This is how things started. And, in the scientific community, there's largely 2 modes of thinking, or 2 main theories about that. One is creation, and the other is evolution. The thing about evolution, though, is there's actually a plethora of evidence that disproves or disallows evolution.
Well, and I think before we go too far into this, I think it's important that our listeners understand that your background in education is physics.
Oh.
I think this is important to know.
Probably important to know.
Because, I have heard similar things, but I think when you have someone who is well versed in the world of physics explain something.
Or supposedly so.
You seem so.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a long time since I've actually really been, immersed in it. But that's the way. Like she was saying, that's my background. That's kind of the way my mind works. I find scientific things very interesting.
Yeah. So continue.
Okay.
But I think that's important to know.
Okay. There you go. There's your tidbit of information. So one of those things that disallows evolution, and it is straight up disallows, is a law which has been around for, I forget. I forgot to look it up, but it's been around for a very long time, hundreds of years. It's the second law of thermodynamics, which states that the entropy of an isolated system only ever increases. Now, if that means nothing to you, should I explain it?
Can you explain what entropy is?
Yeah, so entropy is a measure of disorder, or a measure of chaos. So if you were to measure, if you were to go to, say, a bucket of playing cards, right? And inside that bucket, they're just all completely scattered around, we would say that's high entropy. But if they were piled in a nice, neat stack, that is low entropy, because there is order there. And entropy is a measure of disorder. So the second law of thermodynamics literally says that in any isolated system, and you can make that isolated system as large as you want. I think a lot of times there's the argument that, like, yes, the second law of thermodynamics says in an isolated system, but isolated systems don't exist. It's like, well, yes, they do. Just make them bigger. The universe, because what we're really talking about is the origin of the universe. And so you make the entire universe your isolated system, and it has to follow the second law of thermodynamics. Okay, where was I at?
Right.
Okay, so entropy, yes. So the second law of thermodynamics says that entropy has to increase in the isolated system, which means that that bucket of cards, if you leave it alone, eventually the cards will fall over and become disordered.
Are these cards in like a castle? Like a tower?
Sure.
Okay.
That works too. Yeah, so it basically just says, and we see this in the world all the time. Waves crashing on a beach turns rocks into sand. If you go up to the top of a mountain, especially if it's a granite mountain, you will find literally sand on the top of the mountain, and it's because wind will hit the rock, and over time it corrodes it. Metal, if you leave it out, it rusts, it decays, it breaks down. All of this is directly because of the result of the second law of thermodynamics. So all across the world, you only ever see stuff break down. You never see something spontaneously or randomly order itself. You never see sand turn into rock. They're always, in order for something like that to happen, you always have to have energy from outside the system added to the system. And not only does it has to be added, it has to be added in an intelligent manner. A good example of this is if you had a pile of lumber that was just sitting in an open field and you threw in a grenade, you are adding energy to the system. So how many times, or if you threw in a grenade to that pile of lumber, would you expect that after it blows up you would have a house?
Probably not.
Probably not. You would go from an ordered stack of lumber to a disordered stack of lumber. And so the energy that is added to the system has to be intelligent and directed. So someone has to come in with building material or with tools and equipment and actually order the system to make the pile of lumber lower entropy and turn it into a house. So this directly disallows evolution, because evolution is the idea that things will randomly or spontaneously gain order or become more ordered over time. They go from amoebas to higher life forms. The second law of thermodynamics disallows that, because the amoeba will eventually die and then decay. It will not turn into spontaneously a higher ordered form. So I don't know if that made sense, but it is one of the reasons why I believe the creation story, as opposed to evolution. Something else is really interesting, and I'll try to go through this a little faster because I don't want to get too deep in the weeds. If you look at granite rock, there in a microscope you can often find little discolorations in the rock or in the crystalline structures.
Like the flecks?
Like the what?
Like the little flecks?
Flecks?
Yeah, like the flecks of colors. Is that what you're referring to?
No.
Okay.
Smaller than that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. anyways, they are called radio halos, and what they are is they're the result of radioactive isotopes decaying while the rock is being formed, specifically at the very end of the formation when it's turning from molten to solid rock, because the solid rock is what we see that in, that little halo in. And there's many different types of halos that result from different isotopes. But one of the really interesting things is polonium-214. You will find polonium-214 radio halos in granite. It's interesting because polonium-214 has a half-life of 164 microseconds, which means that in significantly less than a second, the isotope will completely decay.
So the rock was formed in less than a second.
Yes. At least at the very end of its formation, when it went from molten to solid rock, was less than a second. Which even in just standard terms is basically impossible, because even though evolution says it took millions of years for it to cool, well, that doesn't even make sense in the world that we know, because if you have molten rock, like you can go to volcanic sites and it's not still cooling. Like, it cooled fairly quickly, but it's still not likely to cool in a fraction of a second. And so this polonium-214 radio halo found in granite rock is evidence of, or suggests, that the rock was formed in an instant. So that kind of speaks directly against evolution as well, and for the creation story found in the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just the beginning. Like in the Bible, that's just the beginning.
Just the beginning. Yeah. Yeah. Another cool thing to move on briefly here. Flood stories. You can find flood stories all over the world that all have very similar aspects to them, oftentimes being one man or a man and a woman, or a man and 8 persons, or something like that. And the world is always being destroyed, is always global, and is being destroyed because of the evil in the world, because of mankind. Like, these are some of the things that are almost always found in flood stories all over the world. So that's just only one small bit of information that supports flood story, which is found in the Bible.
And then also just like archaeological digs that have supported, Jericho.
Fossils on the top of the mountain.
Fossils on top of the mountain. I was thinking more just like other stories though, like Jericho.
Sodom and Gomorrah, the
Right.
sites that's just all brimstone and sulfur.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's other archaeological places that also confirm the stories,
narrative.
the biblical narrative.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
At least in big brushstrokes.
Right. Yeah, something interesting, to go back to the flood for just a moment. There is some debate on this, but the Chinese word for boat is pictographic, and it's a vessel plus 8 plus mouth. And there's some debate as to whether or not that's actually the case, but if you get really down to the bare bones, that's what it is: vessel plus 8 plus mouth. Now, whether or not that was intentionally from the Bible, there's not really any evidence to suggest it is, but it's something that's really curious to note. So anyways, those are a few things, at least, that we believe supports biblical narrative in kind of that reality space, as in, okay, here's reality, here's things you can find in the world, and hey, look at that, the biblical narrative supports it, right. Or vice versa.
Yeah.
So before we move on to the next point, I want to mention something that is probably not too important, but I think it's a distinction which we could say, is that a lot of people will say, my creed is the Bible. I personally don't think that phrase is accurate, because I don't know how to say it. If you have, I don't know, I can't think of an analogy. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is I don't think it's accurate to say my creed is the Bible, but rather we take our creed from the Bible. And one of the reasons I really think that is the case is because if you take your creed from the Bible, that means you have digested what is in the Bible and have made it your own. And so then I think it's an actual intentional creed. But anyone can say, "Oh, my creed is the Bible." It's like, okay, like
Well, that
you're
kind of
just
makes me
gonna cough up verbatim what the Bible says, and that's
right.
what. Do you know the Bible? Like,
Well, and there's the verse where like the demons know his name, right? And so, the creed is the Bible, like just having belief in the Bible isn't enough.
yeah,
Because even the devil believes in the Bible. Like
yeah,
he still uses it. He was using scripture against Jesus to tempt him. So it has to be more than
yeah,
just
yeah. You have to digest. It's not a bumper sticker.
yeah.
It's like, my creed is the Bible. No, you take your creed from the Bible, because your creed is a set of beliefs, and the Bible puts forth principles
That you build on.
that you build on. Yeah. Okay, so to kind of wrap up, I think the last section, why do we personally pull our creed from the Bible? Like, what is it that for each of us that has made us decide, yes, the Bible is what I base my belief on?
Take us away, Kai.
Take us away.
I got you. Okay. Well, to be honest, until literally just now, I didn't know what creed meant. I was told it like 5 times and I still didn't understand until now. So, no, I think I was thinking about this actually today. And there is a little situation that happened I work at a coffee shop, and so there's 2 windows. And so there's a drive-through and then a walk-up. And so someone came up, and there's like 2 other coworkers and my boss, and we were just talking to this one regular, I guess. And they were just yapping, and I was listening because that's what I do best and rather do in a group setting, if you can't tell. And so this car pulls up, and I'm like, okay, yeah, like I'll help you. And so I was listening to the person I was talking to, and then I was also listening to kind of like the background conversation, and I heard the customer go like, you know what, like it's fine, it's not like a Christian concert or whatever, something of the lines, but it's not like the Adventist church is real, and or like God isn't real. And I was like, oh, like, and I felt my heart drop, and I'm like, and in the moment I couldn't like just whip around and like join in the conversation because I was midway through a sentence with the customer. But I was thinking about that, and it kept me up a few nights. And I was like, if I had the chance, would I have said anything, or would I have just awkwardly smiled and laughed like everyone else? And so I think it's in those moments where it's really important to know why you believe and what you believe. Because growing up in the church, everyone's like, I think it's very overlooked, because if you're coming into the church as an adult, you've obviously had to study for yourself and really ask the questions. But like me personally, like that's something I struggle with, is asking questions and actually like thinking for myself. Because it's just like, oh yeah, seventh day, that's Sabbath, and or I don't know, other like traditional things. But yeah, I think it's really important. Um, There's something else, but I forgot. So
So why do you personally pull your
oh
creed,
yeah,
your
yeah,
beliefs
yeah.
from the Bible?
There we go. Me personally is because you're not going to get anywhere in life if you don't know what you believe, if that makes sense. And so personally, I'm still figuring it out. But like right now, I personally pull my creed from the Bible because that's what I know to be true. Like when you look at science and the Bible, like a lot of people like to pull them apart, but you see them mesh together so well. You see God in every little design and every little thing. And then when I look at my life, like back my life 20 years ago, I guess, maybe not that far, I couldn't remember that. But
Like
anyway.
15.
Yeah, 15. I just see God in every little part. And then I look in the Bible stories, and I'm like, or like you look in the Bible and there's no way, like just however many authors there were, like it just flows so well. And so, I don't know, for me personally, it's just seeing God in every single little detail. And then, yeah.
Yeah, I think I forget the exact numbers, but it's something like 60 different authors
Yeah.
over the span of like 2,000 years. And they all have perfectly meshed theology.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been the most consistent. Like a lot of religions, you see like new prophets or whatever, and
That
it's like
contradict the
going
old
up and
prophets
down and up and down. But like Christianity, when you go off of the Bible, it's been the same.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a verse about that. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the same from the beginning to the end or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Katie, why do you pull your creed from the Bible?
Yeah, I'm trying to decide how much I want to share. Because I also was raised within, a religious Christian background. And so I definitely can relate with what Kai is saying in regards to just, it's just always been what's been true, so there hasn't been that coming into it. I've definitely spent my time, though, I feel like listening to the other side's argument about, evolution or whatever else, and trying to kind of fit it on for size and be like, does this feel right? No, I can't accept it. So I feel like for a really long time, the Bible was my creed, or my creed came from the Bible by default. But I don't really think that's very good reason. And so I remember even through stages of my life where I wasn't a good Christian or anything like that. I still went to church though, and I still read my Bible. And I remember one time in particular, I was watching a Taj sermon series on Revelation, and I live in Washington area, and so marijuana was legal, and I was very, very high watching this sermon series because I am a good Christian. And right, this was a long time ago. And I remember watching it and having this epiphany that the Bible has been protected through all of these years, like 2,000 years, like you're saying, all these different authors, different elements that have been protected. And even though, you have the French burning where they were taking Bibles and burning it, or the Waldensians recording the Bible, trying to keep it going, like the Bible, there's just something special about it because people have tried to get rid of it and they just can't. And so in that moment, I felt like it was very hooey, like a magical spell book, if you will. But that moment has really followed me. I remember it very clearly, and it has kind of stuck with me in the sense of the magic, if you will, that the Bible has. And I know that's really weird words to put it together, especially if you're very steeped in religion. To hear that is like not great, probably. I don't know. But it's my truth. And as I have aged and become more mature and also studied the Bible more with that reverence, because before that moment, I don't remember coming to my Bible with much reverence. And it didn't seem like it was this mystic thing. It was just like, man, it's the Bible, whatever. Mm-hmm. But after that moment, I was like, wow, there's something really special here. I need to really protect it. And I think that's when it really moved over into becoming like a creed, something to protect, even though I didn't understand why fully. And then as life has progressed, as it does, I started to see God really working amazing things in my life. And I also started a prayer journal where I would write down things that I kind of, again, this is bad. It started in a bad place, but God works miracles. I started writing down things I needed God to take care of. And whether that was, student loans or bills or, whatever worry it was, I started writing them down in a prayer journal. And then from time to time, I would go back and I would reread prayer journals. I would quote, scripture and stuff like that. And I'd be like, wow, like somehow God made it work. And that was kind of a testament to myself of how I could really put my belief in what the Bible had to say. And that The Bible is the literal thread of reality. Like, I can't remember. I think you were explaining it where it's like if you have a piece of paper, we're on the piece of paper and the paper is reality, but God's outside the outside. Do you remember that?
Maybe. I think maybe it has to do with dimensions. Was that?
Dimensions a little bit, but just like the fact that we're on this plane, I think, yeah, a little bit with dimension, but we're on this plane, we're existing, and God's outside the plane, also existing, but he has given us scripture, the Bible, to show us the literal fabric of our being, which is amazing. If you
I'll
think,
go along with it.
sure. If you think about how incredible that is,
Yeah.
like how amazing the Bible is and how we have access to it. And I think what has really happened, especially in America these days, is we have such an abundant access to it.
Yeah.
I think we were counting, we have 6 Bibles that are just on our shelf. Like,
Yeah.
that's not our personal Bibles, that's extra Bibles that we have.
Yeah.
And I think that is what has happened recently that we've seen is the plethora. And so there is a disregard for the significance and the sacredness and the magic, if you will, that the Bible has to offer.
Yeah, I think it's been often said that the devil tried to stamp out and destroy the Bible, and it didn't work. And so now he's trying to put it in every home and make sure we're so busy we don't read it.
Yeah. And he's succeeding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's maybe a silly reason as to what has brought me to personally pull my creed from the Bible, but it's the truth, and that's been God's leading and guiding in my life. So no matter where you're at, if you're listening to this podcast right now, high as a kite, and you get me, praise God.
Yeah. So I did not have my epiphany while high. I don't know if I'd call it an epiphany, but yeah, I think my journey into this state of pulling my creed from the Bible has been a little longer, and I think maybe that's just me in general. I tend to be very steady about where I'm going, and so it takes me a long time to change my mind about stuff and come into my beliefs and stuff. But yeah, I think probably the reason I pull my creed from the Bible can be broken down into kind of 2 main categories. One of them is the piece that I talked about earlier. Is it seems to me that it's the closest to reality, because as you start to look at science and the Bible, they go together very well, like what Kai was saying. And I think that's something that a lot of people misunderstand, is that they think that the science and the Bible are completely separate, or that they have nothing to do with each other. But I think it's also misunderstood in that people are like, no, it's the exact same. It's like, well, not exactly, because from my background, understanding kind of a little bit of what science is and how it works, and then also the Bible, being raised Christian, and in my own personal study, really what the relationship is science can observe the world, and it kind of looks at all the evidence and it says, yo, this thing looks like it was designed. Mm-hmm. And that's as far as it can go, because science cannot look into the past and watch creation happen, because in order for science to say for sure who created this thing, it has to watch it, because it's based on observation. So it can't say, this is who created it, this is exactly how it happened, because no one observed it. Mm-hmm. But it can look at the world and say it looks like it was designed, such as if you were to go into the desert and find a vehicle just sitting there, you start to look at it and be like, oh, this thing moves, like I can pull this lever and it opens and I can get inside this contraption. It looks like it was designed. That's what science can do. It can look at the world and say, this looks like it was designed, but we don't know who. That's where the Bible comes in. The Bible comes in and says, I can tell you who designed it. And so that's, I think, the pairing of science and the Bible, where science says, yo, this world looks like it was designed, and the Bible says, I know who designed it, I'll tell you. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I find really cool. and kind of plays into the whole reason why I pull my creed from the Bible is because, yeah, like I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand with science and the evidence that we can find. Many people will tell you otherwise, but usually there's an agenda behind it, or misunderstanding or misinterpretation or something. The other part of the reason is largely just my own experience. I was raised, Christian as well, and so to large degree, it's where I pull my creed, because that's where you pull your creed from. Like, you're kind of raised into that. That's what your family does. That's what you're taught, and so it's very difficult to make that your own. But over the years, as I have experienced, trials and difficult times, I have chosen to go to the Bible to look for support, to look for answers, and it has never failed me. Even though there have been many times when I felt like I have not had the answers, but that's not because of a failure on God's part or on the Bible's part, but more of a failure on my part to not diligently search for it. But yeah, time and time again through experiences, through the ups, through the downs, and there's been some pretty low downs. Yeah, the Bible has been, I have found to be true. I have found that the words that are there, as our verse says in 1 Peter, all things have been given that pertain unto life and godliness. And I have found that to be true, that as I have looked at the words in the Bible, I don't think I could count, and I definitely could not relate all of the times, but I could probably relate many of them, where whatever I'm dealing with, whatever is weighing very heavily on my heart, and I'm going to God and going to the Bible to try to resolve that, the words have been right for me for the time. And it just hits home so hard that it's like, this has to be real. There's no other explanation for it. Like, there has to be something to it. There has to be somebody behind these words that is still alive, that is still here, still cares.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the two sides, the evidence side of why I believe, take my beliefs from the Bible, and kind of the more experiential side.
Sounds good.
Cool. Any other closing thoughts that anybody has? No?
No, I think we got it.
Cool. All right, so maybe this will help you think of what your creeds are, where you pull them from, and why you pull them from where you pull them from. Do you pull your creed from the Bible? And why is that? Anyways, thanks for listening. Stay tuned till next time. We'll see you all later.